Thank you for that warm welcome. Hello, everyone. Okay, you hear me okay? You can stand back. Wonderful. Okay, moderator, general secretary, clerks, commissioners, fellow guests, and esteemed members of the Presbyterian Church of Canada. Thank you for the invitation and the honor of being here with you today, especially as you mark 150 years of faithful witness. I come before you as a Jewish person, one of a people who carries the memory of deep suffering, but also the call to justice that our faith and collective experience continue to demand that we fulfill. I come before you not just to speak about injustice, but to invite you, to summon you even, to act in the face of it. For I believe, as I know many of you do, that faith without action is hollow, and that neutrality in the face of oppression is complicity. As the late great Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa famously said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse doesn't appreciate your neutrality. I'm joined today by Rabbi David Mivaser, a longtime member, Hamilton resident, and teacher for the many of us who know that our Jewish teachings demand that we act in the pursuit of justice, and that includes, especially now, Palestinians. We are here as resource people to offer perspectives on questions of Judaism, Israel, anti-Semitism, Zionism, and opportunities for solidarity with the Palestinian people. As you know, my name is Balsam. I've served as the national coordinator of IJV since 2017. I'm a fourth-generation Jewish Canadian from Ottawa, though I'm now based in Montreal. My mother's grandparents fled anti-Jewish pogroms in Eastern Europe to settle in the Ottawa-Gatineau area in the beginning of the 20th century. And my father's father survived the Nazi concentration camps and managed to make it to Montreal using his cousin's passport. Growing up, I learned to love and appreciate the Jewish traditions. I was also taught to pursue tzedek, justice, and tikkun olam, the repair of a broken world. These core Jewish values helped shape my approach to life in general, as well as to the implications of history. So for me, the post-Holocaust edict of never again, we hear it all the time, has always meant never again for anyone, for any people. It wasn't until my early 20s that I came to see how deeply the Zionist project, the founding and ongoing expansion of the State of Israel, was bound up with the dispossession and dehumanization of Palestinians. I traveled to Palestine. I lived and worked in the occupied West Bank for nearly 4 years. I experienced the beauty of its land and unbelievable hospitality and generosity of its people, and you'll see that in September. And by the way, the fact that I was openly Jewish, I often identified, never once got in the way of that. And on the contrary, Palestinians were often extra appreciative to meet a Jewish person that was not there to take their lands, throw stones at their kids, which happens, and threaten them at a checkpoint, but to learn and support them. I've been fortunate that my mother and brothers, not to mention my wife, have joined me on this journey, both in spirit and physically by my side. It took her some years to reevaluate the narrative she'd grown up with, but my mom came to visit me while I lived in the occupied West Bank, and after a life of tacit support for Israel and Zionism, she too learned the truth and committed herself to freedom and justice for the Palestinian people. Many of my uncles, aunts, and cousins have also come a long way, prompted in part by my cousin, who, because of his involvement in the movement, ended up meeting a Palestinian woman from Gaza and getting married. She has lost now, I think, I might have lost count, but something like 23 members of her family in Gaza, uncles, aunts, cousins, little girls. They've all been murdered in Israel's assault on Gaza. She also has her grandmother still there, and other family members who are holding on to life amidst the bombing and the starvation. As people who happen to be Jewish, we are not ourselves responsible for these atrocities. To suggest otherwise can rightly be considered a form of anti-Semitism. But our connection to it fomented by Israel's claim to act on our behalf, has incited many of us to take action ourselves and to hold our communities and government to account. This connection that we have obliges us to distinguish clearly between Judaism and Jewishness, ancient traditions and religion, on the one hand, and the State of Israel and Zionism, relatively new ideology, on the other hand. And it compels us to do everything in our power to help change the trajectory of history. Independent Jewish Voices was born of this sense of obligation and moral clarity. We are Jews across Canada who can no longer accept the active complicity of our community's institutions, nor the weaponization of our faith to justify apartheid, genocide, and occupation. What started off as a relatively small outfit in 2008 has grown more than tenfold to an organization that now boasts thousands of members across the country, 25 local chapters, and a wide base of supporters and allies. Some of us are religious, others more secular. Some grew up in Canada, like myself, others in the US, like David, in the former Soviet Union, and elsewhere. Some lived in Israel for years, also like David. Others even served in the Israeli military, several of us. But we're united in the embrace of Jewishness beyond Zionism and in our opposition to Israel's horrific treatment of Palestinians. As Jewish theologian and executive director of Kairos USA, Mark Braverman, has said, our task is to rescue Judaism from an ideology that has hijacked our faith, continues to fuel global conflict, and has produced one of the most systematic and long-standing violations of human rights in the world today. Friends, there has never been a more urgent time to take action on Palestine. Since October 2023, more than 60,000 Palestinian lives have been extinguished by Israel in Gaza. And those are conservative estimates, and I'm including there those who have been lost under the rubble for now over a year, as well as hundreds of thousands more scarred mentally and physically for life. Starvation is being used as a weapon of war. Hospitals, nearly all of them, universities, schools, shelters have been bombed to smithereens, entire families and communities erased. Behind the numbers are names and stories, each with their own uniqueness and tragic ending. Rafif al-Kahlout was 10 years old when she was killed in her northern Gaza home. She was a gifted and inspiring artist, her drawings depicting life in the open-air prison that is Gaza. Elham Farah, a Christian woman, and my friend Hammam's aunt, known as a pioneer music teacher, bled to death in the street after being shot by an Israeli sniper, who then prevented rescue workers from reaching her. Her only crime, walking home to fetch warmer clothes. Yusuf Azem, a 17-year-old aspiring journalist, was killed while filming the aftermath of a bombing. His camera, still recording, lay next to his body, the footage inside showing his final moments running to help the wounded. There are now tens of thousands of such stories, including more than 50,000 of kids alone, as estimated by UNICEF, who have been either killed or seriously injured since October 7th. As a father myself of two young kids, 4 and 6, I think of these kids in Gaza every time one of mine falls and scrapes their knee or wakes up with a nightmare. I can't imagine being a parent trying to console my kids in that context and telling them that everything is okay. It's unimaginable. And let us be clear, these killings and atrocities were not accidents. As Israeli leaders themselves have made crystal clear, this is a deliberate campaign to make Gaza unlivable and to clear Palestinians out, a clear continuation of what Israel began in 1947-48. Some go even further. Israel's deputy speaker of the Knesset, Nissim Vaturi, has called Palestinians subhuman, adding that children and women should be separated and adult men should be killed. This is the level of the discourse. One of his predecessors, who was formerly a deputy speaker in the Knesset, Moshe Feiglin, recently went on the media justifying the mass killing of Palestinians, saying every child every baby in Gaza is an enemy. As you can see, these are not fringe voices anymore. They represent a deeply embedded, and dare I say, genocidal mindset that has infected Israeli society and segments of its supporter base. Indeed, as reported just last week in Israeli newspaper Haaretz, a recent survey by Penn State University researchers of Jewish Israelis found that 82% supported the expulsion of Gaza's residents, 56% favored expelling nearly 2 million Palestinian citizens of Israel, and most shockingly of all, 47% agreed, the quote, "When conquering an enemy city, the Israeli Defense Forces should act as the Israelites did in Jericho under Joshua's command, killing all its inhabitants." Genocide doesn't happen overnight. It starts with dehumanization, which we Jews know all too well. What we're seeing now is the culmination of decades of erasure of Palestinian identity and experience, of military occupation, dispossession, and apartheid, all in the name of Zionism, an ideology that seeks maximum land and rights for Jews and minimum for Palestinians. The way it's often portrayed, it's as though Hamas's attacks on Israel on October 7, 2023, came out of nowhere, unprovoked. Yet there could be nothing further from the truth. Roughly a third the size of the city of Hamilton, Gaza, it's 365 square kilometers, Hamilton's about 1,200, has been described as an open-air prison, besieged by an Israeli land, air, and sea blockade since 2007. From then on, Israel's engaged in periodic bombing campaigns, sometimes referred to by Israeli leaders as cutting the grass, killing thousands and almost completely destroying the Gazan economy. Some of you might know that roughly 80% of the people in Gaza are there in the first place because they were driven out, or their grandparents or parents were driven out of what is now Israel. They're almost all refugees. And of course, forbidden from returning to their lands. This is the context in which Hamas's October 7th attacks on Israel came about 20 months ago. I say this not to excuse or defend it, it was horrific. But it is important to put it into its context. In his new book, Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, Peter Beinart, Jewish-American Orthodox Jewish journalist, argues that the best analogies for October 7th lie with the many cases of colonized people violently rising up against their European colonizers. Like the Lowry massacre by Mau Mau rebels seeking to rid themselves of British colonialism in 1950s Kenya. Gruesome, pitiless attacks by oppressed peoples resisting their oppression. Many ask, how can Jews, a people who experienced the Holocaust and centuries of persecution, go on to oppress another people? And yet here we are. One way of understanding it, of course, is that hurt people hurt people. As Dr. Gabor Mate, a child Holocaust survivor and fellow IGV member, explains, and I'm paraphrasing, trauma survivors and those who identify with them are by no means immune from becoming themselves perpetrators of trauma. On the contrary, they're even more susceptible to transferring their trauma, whether direct or intergenerational, onto others. The answer to this deadly cycle of trauma is not more trauma. The answer to ethno-nationalism is not more ethno-nationalism, and the answer to genocide is not more genocide. The answer is what we call tikkun olam, healing and repairing the world and ourselves with it, so that we can live and thrive without domination or dispossession. And so I turn to you, not just as fellow Canadians, but as fellow people of the book. You have before you a resolution that offers tools of peace, including boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. These are nonviolent responses to an extremely violent reality. And they are tried and true responses that are modeled off of a successful campaign to end apartheid in South Africa. Palestinians have been calling for these actions, for BDS, because they need our help. Most in Palestine can't even boycott Israeli goods, just as many of you, no doubt, are doing with American goods these days since Trump, because they're under Israel's rule and captive to the economy. So they need our help to apply some pressure on Israel. Some of you may worry, will this be seen as anti-Semitic? Let's be crystal clear here. Anti-Semitism is about discrimination, violence, and harmful stereotypes against Jews as Jews. As the well-worded resolution from the International Affairs Committee states, quote, criticizing the policies and actions of the government of Israel when those policies are racist, illegal under international law, apartheid, also under international law, or deadly, is not anti-Semitic. On the contrary, to conflate Jews with the Israeli state practicing these various crimes is itself anti-Semitic, because it reduces an entire people and faith to the actions of a government. Furthermore, the narrative that Palestinians and their supporters oppose Israel's actions because they hate Jews is not only false, but fundamentally racist or anti-Palestinian racist. The conflation of criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism has been a decades-long concerted effort to muzzle and immobilize the movement for freedom and justice in Palestine. To be sure, it does not make Jews any safer. Fighting anti-Semitism in meaningful ways has to focus on joint struggles against racism and white supremacy. That's a lot of the work that we do. Instead, we see pro-Israel groups and politicians partnering with the very white supremacists that threaten us both. The unfortunate and deadly truth is that many individuals and institutions have been afraid to commit to the struggle for justice and freedom on account of these bad faith accusations of anti-Semitism. But that's changing. More and more groups and individuals are finding the courage to speak out and take action, backed by a growing consensus among human rights organizations, legal experts, and genocide scholars. It's basically unanimous, including Jewish and Israeli ones, that what is unfolding in Gaza is not merely a tragedy, but a genocide, requiring action by all of us. The Presbyterian Church of Canada is already part of a wider movement of churches that have taken significant steps to hold Israel and the businesses that support it to account. As you may know, the Presbyterian Church in the US has divested from corporations complicit in the occupation. They've explicitly rejected Christian Zionism in all its forms and formally recognized that Israel's treatment of Palestinians meets the definition of apartheid under international law. Several Presbyterian churches and associated groups in the US have also declared themselves apartheid-free communities, which we are as well, committing themselves to doing everything in their power to end all support to Israel's regime. And here in Canada, the United Church of Canada has called on our government to completely sever ties with Israel over its crimes. While Christian Zionism, particularly in the US, but also here, lends dangerous and erroneous theological backing to support for Israel's policies, mainline churches like yours can be a powerful counterforce. Christian Zionist leaders like John Hagee of Christians United for Israel claim 10 million followers, it's about 2/3 the number of Jews in the world, and openly say that Hitler was sent by God to push Jews to Israel, hastening the second coming of Jesus. These are what count as Israel's staunchest allies today. But Christian Zionism need not go that far to be harmful. Just the belief that a Jewish supremacist state in Palestine is justified because God supposedly promised the land to Jews helps to maintain the status quo at the expense of Palestinian lives and land. The Bible repeatedly implies that God's promise of the land of Canaan, to the Israelites is conditional on their living in God's ways. Great prophets of the Bible, including Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Hosea, were clear that God would cast out the people of Israel for their sins and would take them back only when truly worthy, and along with the coming of the Messiah. And last I checked, we haven't seen that. From our perspective, of course. Slightly awkward there.
Good one.
It is exactly this biblical theology of the relationship of our people to the land that the early Zionists rebelled against, and which many Christians ignore when they profess that the modern state of Israel is the fulfillment of prophecy. So as Jews stand up and say, "Not in our name," so too must Christians. Yet this is not just an issue of identity and faith, of Judaism and Christianity, of Islam. As Canadians too, we are deeply implicated. Our taxes subsidize so-called charities that fund Israeli settlements and the Israeli military. Our pension funds and banks invest in weapons manufacturers. Our government buys military goods that are marketed as battle-tested on Palestinians and allows for Palestinian companies, or Canadian companies, I should say, to profit off of sending arms to Israel. Our government seeks to restrict protest and speech, falsely conflating necessary and valid criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, for example, with the definition that Dorcas spoke of. You have before you a resolution which I think is measured, moral, and necessary. Once adopted, and I hope it will, and acted upon, it will help position the Presbyterian Church of Canada on the right side of history. And most importantly, contribute to a global movement including Palestinians, Israelis, Christians, Muslims, and Jews demanding an end to the bloodshed, and one day, we must pray, true peace and justice in the Holy Land. Thank you.